Hi everyone, my name is Joseph and welcome to Digimon Seekers Chapter 4, Part 4, Sons of Chaos Seekers. So this part, I would argue the action's starting to slow down a little bit, but we're definitely still in the climax, we're definitely still in the end game of the story. So let's go ahead and jump into it. The first quote that I have put up begins the part itself. It was over in an instant. It was over in an instant. Oryoromon's twin blades fell to the ground. Oryoromon, wings broken, plunged toward the networked seas, ultimately slamming into the gateway. Its long body bounced onto the ground where it lay unconscious. Yolene too was knocked out deep inside the Digicore. In an instant, Oryoromon regressed to their rookie state, either due to the damage they sustained or an instinctive desire to protect Yolene by extending her mind-linking time. Dorogoromon also reverted to Duromon upon seeing Ryudomon lying on the ground. The Digicore is intact, Duromon said as Kosuke hollow-eyes himself beside his partner. I know you can't hear me, but I'm going to restrain you, Yolene, Kosuke said. He activated a piece of software that immediately restrained Ryudomon. The software was identical to the one used to restrain Messengermon on the X Nation's data server. It didn't allow anyone to control Ryudomon so long as Yolene was mind-linked, but it would prevent Ryudomon from moving. Kosuke breathed a slight sigh of relief. One part of the plan was complete. Apologies, Ryudomon. This was the only way, Doromon said, though they did not seem particularly remorseful. So I'm not going to lie, the specific part I wanted to focus on was the dialogue at the end. But I felt like reading that without the context, the beginning part of the story, may have been just a bit too much of a code opening. But despite that, I do like how in the beginning of the story, the slight mention of Oryoromon possibly devolving back to Ryudomon, possibly because he's still thinking about Yolene. He wants to protect Yolene. Just that small detail I do really appreciate, because as always, one could probably tell, I'm a big fan of the relationship that Bandai typically showcases between the Digimon and their human partners. It's true. They do state due to the damage that they sustained, or again, I'd rather believe the latter portion, the instinctive desire to protect Yolene by extending their mind linking time. So that was the book. Sorry about that, everyone. You may have noticed that there was a sound in the background. I got a message that distracted me a little bit. Anywho, so what I also like about this quote is so even though this passage kind of ends, I would argue a little bit, not negatively, but it kind of portrays Doromon in a, we're getting more information about both Doromon and Kosuke. I would argue they weren't as warm and community focused as I thought they were at the beginning, but we'll come back to that a little bit. But with Doromon, the way this passage ends, apologies Ryudomon, this was the only way, though they not seem particularly remorseful. So that line again kind of does portray Doromon in a sort of neutral and sensitive kind of light. He's doing what he's doing because it's part of the objective that he wants to complete. But there's some textual evidence to kind of push back against that. Like, for example, Dorogoromon also reverted to Doromon upon seeing Ryudomon lying on the ground. I can't help but feel like that does showcase some empathy. The previous portion does highlight that Oryoromon devolved in order to give more mind-linking time, possibly for Yolene. One could argue that Doromon's doing the same thing right here. But the fact that that's not mentioned, I think that's being done on purpose. Again, this would be one of those instances where I'd love to see the original translation to see if maybe that it is true that it's not being mentioned in this instance. What's not being mentioned? The whole mind-linking, devolving to save time. So I am just hopeful that Doromon is a bit more warmer than we're being led to believe. I would argue so far that Logomon was really portrayed as being cold and insensitive, but I would say that that's not entirely true. He may come off as that way. I'm getting the opposite feeling with Doromon. At first, I felt like he's very warm and welcoming, but now I'm starting to see maybe that may not be the case, and it's also true for Kosuke as well. And then lastly, concerning Kosuke, I know you can't hear me, but I'm going to restrain you, Yolene. Again, the fact that he's talking to her, he doesn't need to do that. He could be just code, calculating. As he says right here, after this passage, Operation Tartarus, Phase 2 complete, Doromon, commence Phase 3. He could just have said that, put those shackles or the restraints on Yolene slash Ryudomon, and that's it. But the fact that he's making the choice to speak to Yolene, I do believe that's his empathetic side. We the audience know that Koski's not a bad individual, at least I hope he's not. He's only doing this, he's only Tartarus because of, well, the original Operation Tartarus when he lost Saya. Moving forward, even for a double S-class mind linker like Tartarus, the fight with the Yorimon had been taxing. He still, this is a slight tap over here, he still had more than enough time left to do what needed to be done. Our Yorimon was a formidable foe, Doraemon said, looking down at the restrained Ryurimon. Indeed, sorry to put you through that a second time. Had we not been mind-linked, I wouldn't have made it. I'm sure of it, Doraemon said, not quite saying what they wanted to. Our Yorimon was so powerful because they were mind-linked to Yolene, but this time, the very source of the strength was a liability that cost them the fight. That so long as Yolene harbored regret in her heart, she would never be able to stop Koski on his relentless quest to save Saya. So this passage I found to be really interesting just because essentially it's admitting Yolene is the more powerful mind linker. Yolene and Ryurimon should have won, but as a previous part had listed, why didn't she win? Because of her emotional reaction to Koski. And that's something that Koski was aware of, and thus I wouldn't say he took advantage of, but he definitely included that aspect, her feelings, her emotional response, how she would react. He included that in his plans. And as we could tell, it all worked out pretty well. And I don't want to jump too much ahead, but we're also going to see that EG played a big part in his confidence. As a quick reminder, in the previous part, it was mentioned that during the briefing, Koski was very confident that he would be winning against Yolene and Yorimon, and EG was quite curious as to why that would be. And we now know that part of it was the emotional reaction, and also part of that as well was the evolution from Logomon into Logomon into not Hell Logomon, his newest form. I forgot the name about that. Sorry everyone. As one could tell, I'm not the best when it comes to names, but I do my best to memorize them as soon as I can. Since Logomon's ultimate form was barely mentioned last chapter, unfortunately I forgot his name, so I do thank you for your patience. But anywho, so we'll discuss that at a later point though, why Koski was waiting for that moment to occur, and why that was a detail that made Koski so determined, so confident that he will be winning. That's essentially why I really like this passage. It mostly comes from the portion after the colon. Yorimon was so powerful because they were mind-linked to Yolene, but this time the very source of their strength was a liability that cost them the fight. That so long as Yolene harbored regret in her heart, she would never be able to stop Koski on this relentless quest to save Saya. Sorry, I was looking around for my cat. Usually she's with me, but I guess the message from earlier may have spooked her. The ding of that sometimes makes her scuttle off. Anyways, that was a bit of a tangent. But so I mostly like this passage for that quote that I just read. I really appreciate how Koski is not devaluing or belittling Yolene's skills, and in addition to that, Doraemon as well. They're completely aware that it was external factors that allowed Koski and Doraemon to win this fight. And despite them winning, though, I love how they are emphasizing that it was a challenging fight. It was not just a cakewalk. It was not just as if slicing through butter with a heated knife, right? In other words, it's just smooth as butter, right? But yeah, continuing forward, Tartarus Duragoromon defeated squad leader Yolene. The Digipolice had no contingency plan for this nightmarish development. They couldn't possibly lose. They had superior firepower. They quashed every single rebellion through sheer force until now. At least that's how it worked in the real world. The digital world proved much different. There were no rules of engagement or laws to be followed. This was war. So I won't lie, I like this passage more for the meta commentary that it's kind of doing. Meta very slightly, because in case one is unaware, because typically it is true, right? Because in history, usually it is the bigger war, the bigger army that wins against the other foe, unless there's superior strategy being employed, tactics that's being done to turn the underdog into the winner of the fight. But I love how essentially what's being highlighted right here is that they couldn't possibly lose. They quashed every single rebellion through sheer force until now. But wait, that's the real world. Currently, they're not in the real world. They're in the digital world. And thus, at least that's how it worked in the real world. The digital world proved much different. There were no rules of engagement or laws to be followed. This was war. I won't lie, suppose I am being a bit biased. That specific line, there were no rules of engagement or laws to be followed. This was war. I suppose I'm using that line to justify what Kosuke is doing. Because again, I really did enjoy Kosuke and Doraemon's character. And up to this point, it's kind of feeling like they're being set up to maybe be the anti-hero, if not the antagonist of the story. And I'm really hoping that's not going to be true. And as much as I might be defending him, I think that we could empathize with what he's doing, with why he's doing this in the first place. And that line, there were no rules of engagement or laws to be followed, because not only are we not in the real world, but we're also in the digital world. It's a much more different place. Thus, Kosuke is using what he has at his disposal in order to save who he loves, which is Saya. So this was a bit, oh no, never mind, sorry, there was a bit of a longer quote. Sasuke and Yolene agreed upon 3 things prior to embarking on the mission. First, that Sasuke would take command of all the Digipolice's units. Second, that she would keep Numemon in their champion form and avoid engaging the enemy so she could remain mind-linked for as long as possible. Third, in the event that Yolene and Oromon fell in battle, Sasuke was to order a retreat. The OCC's taken squad leader prisoner. I know. That's why there's no other choice, Sasuke screamed, as much to convince herself as to make her orders heard. The balance of power had swung toward the SOC. Fighting any longer would result in total defeat. It went without saying that Yolene understood her deputy desires to protect her boss at all costs. She got her own way to set up the Digipolice unit inside the police, which rendered her as a pariah among nearly all her superiors, but an idol to her officers. Nevertheless, they were part of the Digipolice and the police at large. Orders were orders. So this passage, I think, really, as always, there's a twofold aspect to this. The personal aspect and then the world building aspect. We'll quickly start with the world building aspect, and I'll go to the personal aspect. So the world building aspect I'm talking about is Yolene had gone her own way to set up the Digipolice unit inside the police, which rendered her a pariah among nearly her superiors, but an idol to her officers. So essentially, what that's saying to me is that Yolene made the conscious effort. There was no Digipolice unit. There was no unit within the police that was focusing on digital crime. And Yolene came in and she purposefully made the police station, the unit to have, the police force to have a specific unit to deal with digital crime. And I could see why her superiors would frown upon that, right? They probably are thinking, oh, the digital world, who cares? That's a useless place. What really matters are the things that's being enacted out here in the real world, the laws that's being passed, the bills, and how we enforce that. Who cares about the digital world, right? But why? So the superiors, those who are above her, yet despite that, she was an idol to her officers. So her peers, the people who understood why the digital unit, the Digipolice was necessary, they respected her for going all the way and actually doing something to create a force to combat digital crime. I like that a lot, really. As always, it really showcases how much gumption Yolene has. And even though it made her a social outcast, she didn't care about that, because I'd argue, again, she may seem cold and calculating externally and superficially, but it's only because she's always keeping the community and those she loves in mind. And so why did she start the Digipolice? Well, she lost a loved one to digital experimentation. If digital crimes, hacking is becoming much more prevalent, she would want to stop them in order to prevent chaos from coming from those illicit activities, but also from loved ones being accidentally lost, like Saya. So I just really like that world building aspect. Yolene was the force behind the creation of the Digipolice. She was a pariah, but yet she was also respected from her own unit. No wonder Sasuke has so much loyalty to Yolene. To be frank, if I was working under Yolene, I would have loyalty as well. With that being said, I think that's a great segue to talk about Sasuke now. So I love how when we first get introduced to her, she does seem very hot-headed, like she doesn't really listen to the rules that's been set and established, yet obviously that's not true. The 3 rules that was set into place, and Sasuke's actually following all 3 orders. Even the last one, even if she doesn't want to do it, to retreat if Yolene is defeated. The fact that Yolene is enforcing that and also making sure people, her unit, her peers understand that they need to retreat, I think really showcases how much Sasuke, like e.g., superficially they may seem like they can't get the work done. They might not get the objective completed. When push comes to shove, they can do it. Why? Well, because they're determined and they are focused. I especially love how I know that's why there's no other choices. Satsuki screamed as much to convince herself as to make her orders heard. Again, she's conflicted. She wants to stay and help Yolene, but she also has her orders. As the last sentence says, nevertheless, they were part of the Digipolice and the police at large. Orders were orders. So yeah, I really did like that passage. Marvin kept EG covered. So I'm not gonna lie, this part did kind of confuse me. I think this might come up in the future. Koski asks for EG to be brought to them where they're located currently with Ryodimon and Doromon. And then Marvin says that he'll use you know what. And we're not really sure who you know what is. I assumed it was Erigimon, and this is this portion with Erigimon. Marvin kept EG covered as he joined up with Tartarus and the others. He noticed Dorogurumon. Excuse me, that was a hiccup. How he reverted to Doromon and saw that Koski's hollow-eyed avatar was a dead ringer to the man himself. Okay, I fetched and delivered the new kid. I should get going, Marvin said. Watching them once again, yet just Logomon trot up to the others. The SOC leaders had to tap out for now. Thanks, what are you off to? Gotta pick up my kid from school. Busy. Sorry to take so much out of your day. It's fine, I got a good story to tell. To tell him once they're older. I can say I held my head high and put up a hell of a fight. I'm glad to see it that way. The Digipolice retreating seemed as good a time as any to get out of here. I'll catch you later, Marvin said with a smile as his Digimon left. So, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but the reason why this passage confuses me is because later on, it's implied that Marvin is still here. So, someone please correct me if I'm wrong, but in this passage, it seems like Marvin is helping to transport EG. It's not very specific. Again, I'm assuming it's through Erigimon. And then he has to leave to pick up his child. Just keep that detail in the back of one's mind because there's going to be another passage where, Marvin is present. And that did throw me off a little bit. This might be maybe a egregious error from the translation. Maybe the biggest one since the first chapter. Or maybe I'm just accidentally missing something. Again, one of those instances where I wish I could see the original translation. But I don't think it tarnishes the story too much. Anywho, so besides for reading this because of the confusing element for myself, I did want to read this as well just because I do like Marvin's character. The way that, so if this is Marvin and he does have a kid, I love how he's still keeping his kid as priority, but he's also doing what he can to assist the Sons of Chaos and Tartarus with their objective. Definitely an individual who's a team player, and I just like him a lot because the way that he was introduced in chapter 4 when EG and Logomon were surrounded, and then all of a sudden Marvin comes out with Erigimon. I think he says something along the lines of us getting this party started without us, or you're in over your head or something like that. I just really appreciate Marvin's character, and I like how this establishes him as a emotionally adept individual. He's emotionally mature, and he's able to keep his fatherly duties in mind with his personal obligations too. And yeah. And you're continuing forward. This time we're going to use the old interfaces and the prototype Digimon to access a backdoor to the digital world. Prototype, Logomon asked. Old interfaces, EG chimed in. Puzzled, they turned to look at one another. What? You didn't know? Doromon asked, taken aback. Don't you get all high and mighty just because you knew something we didn't? End your little power trip and tell me what's going on, Logomon snapped. I just thought you would have heard something about it from Professor Ruzenji, Doromon protested, stoking Logomon's ire. Oh, hang on, EG chirped as he caught Logomon in a headlock to prevent them from charging Doromon. You mean this thing on the forehead? He said, his finger pointing at the wolf's head. So, I just like this passage because I'm always a big fan of when the writers, emphasize Logomon's ferocity, his attitude. He certainly is a lot sometimes. And again, I guess I just like that a lot because typically when we have our protagonist Digimon, they've always been very sweet. The only one that I could think of that's not been like that has been Gamamon, but that's a slight asterisk. Spoilers of when I've seen Digimon Ghost Game, but Gamamon essentially he's a bit bipolar. Right? We have his typical Gamamon self, but then his other when Gula's Gamamon takes over his darker side. Right? Logomon doesn't really have that. Well, he doesn't have that. It's just all Logomon. So when Logomon becomes impatient or becomes snappy, it's not because he has a second personality or anything like that. It's all Logomon, right? And I know that might be bad, but I think as Logomon, bad as in that's not a good attitude to have, a good kind of mindset to be, a good way to behave in social settings. I think as Logomon continues interacting with individuals, with people, in an actual community, he'll slowly learn to adapt. Essentially, he's emotionally mature to know how to speak with individuals. He just gets taken aback quite often. I also like this passage, just the way that Logomon, the way that EG has to literally get a hold of Logomon to stop him from charging Doraemon. It's just, I'm not gonna lie, we were watching the anime. I would imagine Doraemon probably not reacting at all, not backing up or taking a defensive stance. He's just looking at Logomon as he's trying to charge him. Yeah, but also what I find interesting about this is the fact that the professor didn't explain the interface. Is that a detail that EG needed to know, or is that just maybe something that the professor didn't think that EG needed to be aware about? As always, like with Kosuke, I'm hoping that the professor is not going to be the antagonist or anti-hero. I'm hoping that there's reasons for him withholding information, creating these different factions, or working with these different individuals from different factions. But I guess we'll find out as we continue forward with the story. Digimon with those interfaces are known as prototype Digimon. So like, they're not finalized or something? And why is my interface considered owed? Logomon's mood turned sour, likely thinking they were being called an outdated piece of junk. It just means it was based on an older version of the digital world. It does not necessarily imply inferiority. Doraemon calmly replied. That sounded horrible the way I read that, excuse me. Let me read that again. It just means it was based on an older version of the digital world. It does not necessarily imply inferiority, Doraemon calmly replied. Logomon held the tongue. Latest doesn't always mean best. And because of their age, these old interfaces represent a massive hole in the digital world's security. A hole in the security, like the vortexes, back doors that led to the deaths. Will slip in where the system administrator can't see, Tartarus explained. So there are places the admin can't see, E.G. chirped, excited by the thought. So your old interface is like some sort of legendary power, Logomon. You're just as incredible as I knew you were. Yeah, I know I'm incredible. What of it? Logomon said, polishing the interface on the forehead with the front paw like a cat washing their face. So again, like with the previous passage, I mostly like this quote just because it really adds a lot to Logomon's personality. He really does remind me a bit of a brat. But the kind of brat that, again, not that they're selfish, but they're still able to work with the community. Another really great example about this would be Digimon Ghost Game. Like, I can't pronounce his name, but the individual with the band-aids, Kashiro, his Digimon partner, Jellymon, it seems like she's very selfish and very much just thinks about herself. But if one watches the anime, I always love how when something does occur, right away she's thinking about the other individuals in the community. She'll think about, oh, well, we need to go help Gamamon. Oh, we need to go help Ryuli. Come on, Kushiro, and she like drags him along. That's the same impression I get of Logomon. Even though he's a bit of a brat, he's a bit stubborn. Underneath all that brashness is an individual who's quite warm and quite community focused. Especially when he gets all high and mighty. Yeah, I know I'm incredible. What of it? Logomon said, polishing the interface on her forehead with her front paw. I just find that very adorable. Very cute, that reaction. And also EG, I'm curious about EG. Is he saying this because he's aware that Logomon's upset that he's being implied to be called owed this specific passage? So your owed interface is owed like some sort of legendary power. Logomon, you're just as incredible as I knew you were. I got the feeling though that EG is being sincere. He really does seem to appreciate having this partnership with Logomon. But yeah, I just really love the interaction between Logomon and everyone else. Okay, so you need Logomon's interface. What should I do? EG asked, feeling a bit lost. Logomon and Doraemon exchanged a glance. Pray, Logomon said. Yes, pray, Doraemon added. So I'm going to read a little bit more above that, just to give some context. Cracking the gateway requires 3 keys in the form of 3 types of prototype Digimon to be present at the same time. Data, vaccine, and virus. Doraemon cut in, continuing their explanation now that Logomon was convinced they were being degenerated, being made fun of. The 3 rivals, E.G. said, recalling the 3 Holloways objects that floated in DDL's lobby, each with a different type written on it. I'm the data type, the restrained Ridomon here is a vaccine type, and Logomon, you are the virus type. Got it. So what do we have to do? E.G. said, eager to move things along. Now that he was an S-class code cracker, he could do anything, and he was ready to run headlong at the go. You don't need to do anything. Sorry? E.G. asked blankly, the wind instantly taken out of his cells. Tartarus will handle the cracking of the gateway itself. We prototype Digimon are simply the intermediaries through which the cracking will occur. Ah, fair enough. That's why it's okay for Yuriman here to keep napping, Logomon said, putting the pieces together. Precisely. The police would never agree to crack the gateway in the first place. Keeping them restrained allows us to use the interface, and that's all we need. That explained why defeat wasn't enough, Ichi supposed. Okay, so you need Logomon's interface. What should I do? Ichi asked, feeling a bit lost. Logomon and Doromon exchanged a glance. Pray, Logomon said. Yes, pray. So I won't lie, the reason why I originally just want to read the last part because the next portion with adds the part that I began with, I think adds context to the main quote that I want to look at. But the reason why I decided to read before that is just because I won't lie, I'm not quite sure why Logomon says to pray and then Doromon says to pray. If this is meant to be a bit dangerous, I kind of feel like the text didn't really highlight that enough for us to grasp that. So I was just curious about the pray. And then Doromon's also saying, yes, pray. Because usually that means like as in something bad's about to happen. Let's hope it doesn't get worse. Or rather, let's hope that that bad event does not occur in the first place. But this is the main portion that I wanted to read. Logomon, Doromon, and the restrained Ryudomon positioned themselves in a triangle formation with the hollow ice Kosuke at its center. You could have just told me about all this prototype business in the first place, you know, Inji grumbled. He had too much time in his hands now. We couldn't simply gather off any 3 prototype Digimon of different types and use their interfaces. They must all be capable of digivolving to their ultimate forms as well, Doromon said. Oh, I see. So you're waiting for Solo Logomon to show up. So as one recalls at the beginning of the video, I was saying how Kosuke and Doromon, their intentions may have had an editorial motive. I really loved how it seemed like Kosuke was being so supportive of Iji, as was Doromon when they were fighting in the past part, how he took time away from his fight to encourage Iji to go to the next level and Shinka evolve. But now we know it's because, well, Kosuke needed Iji. Iji having Logomon evolve to his ultimate form, that was part of the plan. If Logomon was not able to do that, then they wouldn't be able to attempt this code cracking at the gateway. So that's what I mean, that this new discovery of Kosuke and Doromon, it does portray them, it does paint them in a different kind of light, but I'm really hopeful that they're not doing this for selfish reasons, that they are doing this because they want to help the community and they want to help the digital world, the real world, and also their loved ones. For Kosuke, that's specifically Saya. For Doromon, he's basically just saying that he's doing this for a revolution in order for Digimon to rise themselves up. Against what? Hopefully they'll specify that. Just found that very interesting. And also the reason why I want to read the previous part for context for the main passage is because how it's stated that Iji, since he has more time in his hands, essentially since he's not doing anything, he's just waiting around, no longer assisting Logomon specifically, but just allowing Logomon to work with Kosuke. So that's why I wanted to read the portion before the page break. Continuing forward, a mega level Chaos Dramon. So this is what the SOC was after when they were collecting state secret Digimon. But who on earth is mind linked to it? Iji said, stunned. This one's a bot, Marvin said, over chat from his mind leaked Aerodramon. Oh wait, maybe that detail he said over chat. So maybe Marvin physically is not present, but Aerodramon is still here. Okay, that would make a bit more sense. Reading that out loud kind of made it click a little bit. As a quick reminder, I was confused as it said how Marvin left to pick up his child, yet Marvin's still here. But that one line I think kind of clarifies that. Marvin said over chat from his mind-linked Aerodramon. Anywho, sorry. This one's a bot. Marvin said over chat from his mind-linked Aerodramon. A bot? Wait, don't tell me you're controlling it. Yep. This one's too volatile. Nobody could possibly mind. Oop. Marvin cut himself short as Chaos Dramon laid out a war. This was enough. That was enough to send the remaining Digimon from the Wasp slum scattering like so many prey escaping a predator. This Digimon was not to be trifled with, and it was loaded with an AI attack routine that was neither friend nor foe. Marvin struggled to control it himself. Good a time as any, Logomon muttered under the breath as he watched the other Digimon flee. What about the Digimon in the 9th district? Iji asked. I told him to run the second anything looked dicey. Don't worry. Digimon in the Wasp slum don't do anything that doesn't benefit him personally, Logomon said with a knowing smile. That knowing smile was probably because that's how Logomon operates as well. Why do something if it's not going to benefit him personally? But I would like to think that also includes his pack. Why do something if it's not going to benefit EG or Leon and Postmon and so forth, right? So as always, I love how they emphasize, the writers always have a tendency to emphasize Logomon's brattiness, his stubbornness. And I also like how, again, despite Logomon seeming like he wouldn't care about the community, I mean, that line specifically says that he told the Digimon, don't risk yourselves. If things look horrible, it's best to remove yourself from the situation. Don't go beyond what you need to do. And the fact that the Digimon from this boss them were here in the first place, I would argue that if Logomon did ask that of them, some of them would be willing to go all the way. So I love how it specifically stated, I told them to run away the second anything looked dicey. I think that really says a lot about Logomon, despite his little tantrums that he throws and everything like that. And then I won't lie, the other person why I wanted to read this quote is just because they mention of this Chaos Shimon. So it's really cool. So it's looking like they have this neutral ally now that Marvin is mind controlling. So that's why they need to go to the X Nation. It seems like to get a sample or a what was used to control Messengermon. That's also what the SOC needed. So that's a cool little detail. I like how they're throwing that back to the part 2, I believe it was, or was it part 1? I always like when stories do that because it makes it feel a lot more tight-knit and self-contained. Really good example of this would be Godzilla -1. Details that were mentioned at the beginning of the movie, they end up playing an important role later on in the movie, like with the fish rising up or with how the method of taking down mines in the ocean, that method of using 2 ships is also used to defeat Godzilla during Operation Watasumi and so forth. I won't go into more detail for spoilers, but I even though it is minor, I like that about this part of the story, how it's connecting back to the past. I do wish that it was emphasized more or it played a bigger role, but maybe it will as we continue forward with the parts, right? So yeah, this net. I want to make sure that's everything. And also, I just like how Marvin, he's the only one who could mind control this bot just because of his skills and his talents. As always, any textual evidence that further elevates these characters, I'm always a fan of because I'm a big fan of all of them. Satsuki, Yolene, Marvin, right now even Kosuke and Doraemon, even though I'm a bit worried, Eiji and the Professor and so forth. And then finally, here's the last quote I want to look at. Chaos Shaman's a machine type. It's responsive to software tools, just like an Android type. So long as I can keep an eye on it and feed it commands as needed, we'll be fine. And so long as I keep an eye on them and feed them commands as needed, we'll be fine. Marvin uses software to pilot Chaos Shaman toward the center of the gateway area, ensuring there would be a convenient target for any remaining enemies in the area. The red Digizoid will make a mockery of any enemy foolish enough to strike them. A single Digimon changed the complexion of the entire battlefield in an instant. We've got into you-know-who shows up, Todorus, Marvin said, using a favorite euphemism. Don't take all day. Sorry, Marvin. Let's go, Eiji, Kosuke barked before turning to Ryorimon. Sorry, Yolene. I just need to borrow your consciousness and Digicore. This was no longer an experiment. It was the first and last chance he had. They were going to crack the gateway, and hopefully, before they became so much rust on the ultimate gatekeeper's blade. With any luck, you-know-who wouldn't even show up. Everyone began their own mental countdown. Satisfied that everyone had their partner's backs covered, Kosuke opened a virtual monitor and entered a command, crack gateway. And that's the end of part 4. So, sorry, I lost my, I lost my train of thought. Excuse me, everyone. Thank you for your patience, though. Oh, yes, so the euphemism. So, you-know-who. So this is the second time that's being used. And the first time, I was unsure. The you-know-who, it seemed like was being used as a positive to help Eiji get transported to where he needed to be taken to. But in this instance, it seemed like it's more being used as a negative way. We need to finish this before you-know-who shows up. I'm curious, are they talking about the Royal Knights, Alphamon maybe reappearing? I think that would make the most sense right now. Or is Kosuke aware of another aspect? I suppose we'll find out with part 5 next week. But besides that, I also like how the way this ends. Again, Kosuke, he doesn't need to talk to Yolene, but this is the second time that he's making sure to apologize to her. Sorry, Yolene. I just need to borrow your consciousness and Digicore. I do wish he had spoken to her. I think if she understood the whole plan, she would have maybe been willing to assist and work with Kosuke, but unfortunately, Kosuke made the choice to keep everything under wraps and did not disclose who Todorus, leading the SOC specifically, was. Thus, this is the conclusion that we're now leading up to. Or rather, this is the setting that we're now leading up to where Ryorimon and Yolene are unconscious. But even though they're being used against their will, I do see, or at least I hope that there is present remorse and guilt on Koski's part. Also like this because, as always, this really emphasizes how Marvin is a really great code cracker. No wonder he's part of Koski's team, and dare I say, I believe he's the second in command. If not, he's very much up there in the higher echelon of the officers. And I like that about him because he's obviously a individual who knows how to take care of programming. And this would be another example of how this goes back to the beginning of the story. I believe it's mentioned how Marvin, the songwriter, the song singer, the reason why he's called the song singer is because of how he manipulates code, how he's able to create programs for bots, like with Epsilon and everything like that. I believe that was mentioned at the beginning of the Seekers, and again, this is being brought up again because it's not being applied. It's being set into motion because Marvin is now controlling a Chaos Dramon, and that's pretty impressive, I would argue. I mean, even the way that Chaos Dramon is described, I didn't read the portion, but at first it's described as very much like Machine Dramon, but a bit more, well, as the name implies, chaotic, right? Chaos Dramon. So, as I said at the beginning of this video, it's looking like the action is starting to slow down a little bit, but I don't think it's going to end. Definitely the next part, I think something else is going to happen. I'm looking forward to finding out what will occur. You guys, thank you so much for listening and watching. I really do appreciate it. My question for everyone is, who do you think you know who is? Is this the gateway somehow a portal to other dimensions and Voldemort's going to show up? That's just a dumb joke, but because Nika's nickname is You Know Who Must Not Be Named, so not one for one, but quite similar to You Know Who Is Coming. Is that what they say? You know who? We've gotten to You Know Who shows up. Anywho, but yeah, so who do you think You Know Who is? Are you still enjoying the story as well? And are you looking forward to the conclusion as Seekers? I know for me, my answer to that would be I think it's either one of the Royal Knights, specifically Alphamon. And am I still enjoying the story? Yes, I am. I'm still hopeful that Koski and the Professor, there's bigger motives that we the readers are not aware about. So again, thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate everyone. Have a prodigious day and take care.